Welcome to the very last lesson in this very long unit on Greece. Although again, I'll have to say, even though this has been will probably be our longest unit for the semester, I am barely scratching the surface. Everything I've given you in this unit so far has been very basic knowledge to hopefully give you some sort of grounding and understanding, not just of ancient Greek civilization, but hopefully you've also seen a lot of comparisons we made between ancient Greece and how they've been very influential on modern Western civilizations today, especially the United States. But this last lesson is going to be on Alexander the Great. I kind of save the best for last type thing. Well, if you view him as the best, but his story is quite amazing. He is one of those where there's so many greats throughout history, but Alexander is definitely one of those who very much deserves that title, the Great. Now, if you also notice, it says, and Hellenization. I can't remember if I said this in an earlier lesson, at least online. I know we talked about it in class, but in the Greek language, I'm not sure how it goes. I just know that the Greeks refer to themselves as, they refer to the land they lived on as Hellas. We call it like mainland Greece. They called it Hellas. So when you see the term Hellenization, this is referring to the spreading out of Greek culture, kind of covering the land. One of the comparisons we'll make when we get to that point is like the idea of Americanization today, or Westernization. So I hope those terms are at least somewhat familiar to you. If not, we'll be talking about it a little bit. And I think I don't know if I'm going to get through all of this in one video, maybe two, but we'll see how this goes. But basically, in the last lesson, we talked about the outcome of the Peloponnesian Wars, where Sparta was able to defeat Athens, or you could say the Spartan, or the Peloponnesian League was able to defeat the Delian League, if you want to put the right names to it. It was really just Sparta beats Athens. And then Sparta then puts down their own allies along with all of Athens and just kind of conquers the Aegean for a good 30 years or so until Thebes rebels and wins the independence. And then Athens gets independence, and you get this three-way split of power in Greece between basically the Theban hegemony, the Spartan hegemony, and Sparta. I don't know if you call them a hegemony at that point, but then the new Delian League, the new Athenian Empire, times two, part two type thing. And the thing is, while all that's going on and they're fighting themselves, there is a new underdog coming up. Again, the main theme of this entire unit, underdog mentality. Well, who are the next underdogs? Well, there are a group of people called Macedonians or Macedonians. You can correct me later on that one. I've heard Macedonian my whole life, and just recently I start hearing people referring to them as Macedonians. Like, have I been hearing it wrong? Are we just pronouncing it a different way? Is it tomato thing? I don't know. Macedonian, we'll go with it. I'm probably going to interchange it because I've been studying up on this and listening to a bunch of podcasts and things like that. It's just quite fun for me, and I just keep hearing to all these different pronunciations. So with that, though, I'm just going to go on with this lesson on Alexander. Now, when we start off the lesson on Alexander, we don't start with Alexander. We start with his dad, a guy named Philip II, who is king of Macedonia, whatever. This guy is a pretty brilliant guy. And he loves Greek mythology. He views himself as actually kind of a Herculean figure. He even believes that he has the blood of the gods within him. I can't remember which god he was thinking of here, like Ares, Hercules, anyways, Zeus. But he's very much into that. And he gets this grand goal. So when I'm going off of this, the grand goal is actually number 3 there, destroy the Persian Empire. The first 2 goals turn out to be goals that are leading up to that. By the way, go and take a nice look at the map on the right. You see where Macedonia is, and then you see everything that Philip ends up conquering there, all in red. But anyways, getting back to his goals. So his overall goal is to destroy the Persian Empire. He wants to do something great, something that will get him his place on Mount Olympus with the gods. Be like Hercules, be like all these other demigods in Greek mythology that had earned their place on Mount Olympus. He wants to do the same. And what greater thing could you do than destroy the biggest empire known to man? But he's no fool. He realizes he can't just go do that. He has to prove his worth. He has to be smart about it. Like, how do you go about getting this done? Well, first off, you need a big army. And you don't just need a big army. You need an army that basically does something that no one knows how to deal with, a new innovation. We've talked before about the phalanx. At least I hope I have in the videos. I know we did in class. But he loves the idea of the Greek phalanx. It's worked well. It's worked very well against the Persians. But he's like, well, how do I use the Greek phalanx to subdue all of Greece and subdue the Persians? Well, what he does is he essentially just takes the phalanx, makes sure it's incredibly deep. I can't remember how deep it goes. If his phalanx was something like 12 men deep, or if his went like to 20 men deep. I can't remember what his depth of line of men were supposed to go. But instead of a 6-foot long dory spear with each of his men that the Greeks were accustomed to, he turns it into an 18-foot long spear. Now that's something going to be very hard to hold. If you're trying to hold a spear that's 18 feet long in just one arm, that you're not going to hold that for very long. You could be the strongest guy ever, and that's going to be tough. But he innovates more. He actually comes up with a harness where you can use both arms to hold up the spear, even use your back. Essentially, it's a brace that helps your entire body hold up the spear, as well as hold your shield in front of you all at the same time. It was quite ingenious. So now he has all of these soldiers that are able to have these 18-foot long spears in phalanx formation. It's now basically, I referred to the phalanx earlier as just this big box of bronze, or this wall and box of bronze and flesh, and now it's a big box of wall, bronze, and really long teeth. And it works good. And with that phalanx, he wants to bring all of Macedonia, he already has Macedonia, or Macedonia, whatever. He wants to bring all of Greece under his control, essentially give himself the manpower that he needs to go take on Persia, because Persia can get some big armies. He knows that he's going to have to pull on every Greek city-state he can to pull as many men into his army as possible. But first, he's got to subdue them to do that. So he does just that. Like, again, if you're looking at that map, with this new phalanx in tow, he picks on the city-states one by one by one. And because everybody views him and the Macedonians as just kind of, they're new guys, they're the underdogs, they're the losers. No one really gives them credit. And so, of course, they come into it a bit entitled, a bit overconfident, and they keep losing over and over again until it's just too late. He beats everybody one by one by one by one. He's also a great politician, too. He was quite savvy in how he played people off each other, too. I'm not going to go into that stuff right now in this video. I'm trying to keep a little bit on the short side. But I would suggest looking this up. It's an interesting story. So he gets Greece all in his control. Although, if you notice, Sparta down at the bottom. This is fun to point out. Basically, when he gets down to Sparta, like the homeland of the Spartans, he would love to have the Spartans in his army. But at the same time, even though he has this new innovative army that seems awesome, he does not want to take it up against the Spartans. Probably thinks he can win, but he does not want to take it up against the Spartans. So he makes a deal with them. He's like, hey, if I don't bug you, will you not bug me? And the Spartans were fine with that. In a way, they're actually very happy that Philip just beat down all these Greeks that they had had such a hard time with while they were trying to make them have a better life under the Spartan hegemony. So anyway, so they just go with that, and they just kind of like, yep, we won't bother you if you don't bother us. But he does have all the rest of Greece. Oh man, it would have been nice to have those Spartans in your army. So he has his amazing army with this new innovation with the Macedonian phalanx. He has Greece under his control. All that's left now is to destroy the Persian Empire. Unfortunately for Philip, he gets assassinated. Now, this is actually one of these big things that still is kind of viewed as conspiracy theories to this day, like who really killed Philip. On the surface, it was said that the Persians paid off one of his generals to kill him, and it's basically the way this. I'm not going to tell the story great, so I'll just again summarize. One of his generals kills him. I can't remember if it was like a birthday party, a celebration of some sort. I can't remember. I just know there was something going on, and the general was able to get close, and he kills him. And then the general himself was hunted down and killed. And they found Persian gold on him. So it was like the idea of like, well, the Persians paid him to kill him. But there's so many other circumspect things around this, even from the ancient Greek stories, where like the Greeks don't necessarily believe this story. That there's all these things like, well, maybe it was his wife, Olympia, that did this, or maybe it was someone else, maybe Alexander himself, the son of Philip. did this. And there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to say so. By the way, a lot of people love to point towards his wife, saying she's the one that really did it. But officially, it was Persia. They knew what he was going to do. Anyways, you can look that one up as well if you'd like to. Just one of those fun dramas in ancient Greek history. So, but when Philip does die, his basically 19, 20-year-old son, Alexander, takes the throne. Now, Alexander, his dad made sure that he was going to be educated. Like he was the one next in line for the throne. Like he was being trained for this. And Philip even hired Aristotle, had Aristotle come up to Macedonia. Man, I have no idea which I'm saying it. So just going to keep it the way I've always said it and always heard it. So Macedonia, and Aristotle becomes a tutor of Alexander. And this is one of those things where like it's viewed that Alexander is just a, how do I put this? It's just a smart kid. All the words for that just went out of my mind. I apologize. But a smart kid, and so to have the smartest guy in the world to come tutor him is just, well, this guy becomes a genius, or is viewed as a genius at every level. I say military genius there, yes, he becomes a military genius. But he's a philosophical genius. Because he has Aristotle as his tutor, he dabbles in everything that Aristotle did, in the sciences and math and things like that. Alexander himself becomes a genuine know-it-all. But, of course, as we look at him in history, his military genius side is really what shows through because of what he's able to do, conquering the Persian Empire, giving away the end of the story a little bit there. But that is basically what he wants to do. Once he takes the throne, he's like, I'm going to fulfill my father's dream. I really like that idea of conquering Persia. My dad worked really hard for this, and so I'm going to continue it. By the way, this is one of the things where a lot of people think Alexander didn't really have any reason to kill Philip if he admired him so much and continued his dream. Anyways, just throwing that one in there, that whole conspiracy stuff. But Alexander runs into a problem right off the bat, and that is, well, the Greek city-states that were just subdued by his dad now see Alexander. They look at him as this whelp. They don't see him to be this smart kid. They're like, we're not going to follow this guy. We can rebel. He's not his dad. Luckily his dad's gone. So we're just going to say, no, we're not coming. So Alexander has to forcefully put them to rights again. So you have essentially a second war. And you could argue that this was harder for Alexander than it was for his dad. His dad was able to pick off city-states one by one and was, a savvy diplomat. And this time, diplomacy doesn't work. The Greeks are kind of wise to what Alexander and the Macedonians are doing. So Alexander has to bring his army down and basically go against a very large contingent of Greeks led by the city of Thebes and crushes them, just outright crushes them. And as a message to all other Greeks, he destroys Thebes, just destroys Thebes. This is the end of Thebes. That great city. And when that happens, that sends the message quite well to everybody else. Even places like Corinth and Athens, like, don't mess with me. You better sign back up, which they do. So now he has his father's empire back under, now his empire, Greek empire. He still leaves Sparta alone, from what I remember. And then he decides to go off to Persia. Now, going over to Persia, not going to spend tons of time explaining what's going on here, but you do need to know that it's led by a guy named Darius III. So again, this is about 150 years now after the Persian Wars that we talked about a few lessons ago. So this is not like the grandson of Darius I. He's much further down the line of leaders of Persia. And Persia is still a fairly powerful empire at this point. You could say it's not really at the point of like they're about to fall or jack themselves from the inside out type stuff. But Alexander, he's going to take it to him anyways. And just long story short, I tell a lot of stories in class. I'll tell a few here. It looks like I am going to be able to hopefully finish this in this class here today, or this video lesson here today. But that's Alexander's empire. So again, going back, Persian Empire. After about a decade of fighting it out, there's Alexander's empire. He does it. He conquers the Persians. Just to go, there's some huge things that happen in this. I'll just talk about a few of them. The first major battle that Alexander has, I can't remember the name of it. Gordium sounds familiar. That might be like the Battle of Gordium, but he has a major battle against the Persians up here in Asia Minor and is able to win because of that phalanx. He has a massive, massive phalanx. It's said to have stretched for miles. So it's very hard to get around. Then he always made sure that he had cavalry on the edges to help him out, to essentially knock it out flanked. Then he has another major battle called the Battle of Issus, where he actually fights against Darius III himself. And in this one, this was a close run thing. Darius ends up retreating. It's one of those things where like he probably didn't have to, and Darius III is actually viewed as kind of a bit of a pansy in history because, man, if he just wouldn't have run away at a certain point, maybe he would have beat Alexander here and there. And this, by the way, Alexander himself admits that there was quite a few times that he was like, well, things went well for me. It wasn't looking like it. So, but Darius, once this initial army, which is said to be like 200,000 soldiers, again, could be very exaggerated numbers there. It's said that Alexander's army at this point was something like 40 to 50, maybe 60,000 at most. But Darius goes off to the rest of the empire and starts gathering up an even larger army. He's going to come back and just crush Alexander, but it takes him a few years to do so. During this time, while Darius III is over here in the eastern half of the empire, Alexander starts basically taking out the western half. Like his is the main army and really the only army in this whole western half of the Persian Empire. And king after king and region after region and kingdom after kingdom submits to him. And he just gets used to this. It's like, oh, you're submitting to me. Even, by the way, the Jews, you could say the kingdom of Jerusalem, hails him as like as sent by God to free them from the Persians. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that does not happen very much in Jewish history, where they're like, oh, thanks, God sent you. It's usually like, no, we don't like you. We're going to rebel against you. Usually that's how their history's gone in these ancient times. So it's quite odd that they view Alexander as this great liberator and sent from God. But he accepted it. He wasn't going to say no to that. So he goes down to Egypt. There's some stuff that happens there, but he's actually crowned pharaoh of the Egyptians. He proclaimed actually the god down there. He's not going to say no to that either. They're so happy that he got rid of the Persians for some reason. But there's one group of people that basically say, no, screw you, Alexander. We're not going to submit to you. And in fact, thanks for getting rid of the Persians, because we don't want to be under their thumb either, but we're not going to submit to you. And these are the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians are right here. The capital city is Tyre, and that is not a good placement for that dot for Tyre. If you're looking at that, if you're seeing that, where's my pointer? Right there. It actually should be out in the ocean. Tyre was something like a quarter mile, half mile or so off the coastline originally. It's no longer today because of what Alexander does to it. When they basically say, hey, you can't get to us, you have an army but no boats, and we have a massive fleet, we think we're just fine, we're going to stay safe from you and everybody else at this point, we have our independence. He's like, no, you need to submit, you're ticking me off a bit. So he leaves part of his army there as he goes down to Egypt. Sorry, I'm going back in the story a little bit, I apologize. But he leaves part of his army there and says, by the time I get back, I want to be able to walk over to that city, and we're going to take it. So his army basically for the next, I can't remember how long this took, months, 8 months, maybe a year or so, they're throwing dirt and rocks into the ocean to where they actually get a land bridge built out to Tyre. And when Alexander comes back, he goes across there, lays siege, and destroys the city, takes it down. To this day, by the way, Tyre is still a city that is located there. It is a peninsula now instead of an island because of what Alexander the Great did. So he continues on from there, and then you get to this huge, huge battle. It's not even mentioned on this map. I don't know why this map doesn't mention it, because it's arguably the biggest battle of the Alexandrian Wars, where he's taking out the Persian Empire. But basically, Darius returns with this massive army. It's said to have been somewhere between 200 and 250,000 men, and that is believable for the time they had to group up and all the areas he's able to draw off of. Alexander is said to have somewhere between like 40,000 or maybe even up towards 55, 60,000. Although most things I've seen put him at like the 40 to 45,000 range. So how is his little army of 40, 45,000 going to take on this massive army of 200 and 250,000? This is where I'd say you have to go look up some of the YouTube videos. There's some great history tube videos that go into this and talk about how Alexander wins this and kind of how crazy the battle went. And it was a bit of a near-run thing. It's got like chariots with scythes on them and stuff like that. It's fun. But Alexander wins this one. Like with that, basically he's able to see the battlefield. He's able to attack or do a major attack right up the middle of the Persian line, where they don't expect it. You could say draws them off a bit. You could say catches them off guard and wins the battle. Gets Darius to retreat again. Again, a lot of people like to think, well, Darius just wasn't a pansy. He shouldn't have lost this one too. But he loses. This battle called the Battle of Guagamela is basically, it's like somewhere in here in Mesopotamia. And that's it for Darius. Basically at that point, the Persian Empire's just done. Everybody realizes there's a new sheriff in town, and just kingdom after kingdom then starts sending in basically their requests for, hey, yeah, we'll join you now. You can be our new king of kings, Alexander. So therefore establishing the Empire of Alexander. There's even a king out in Bactria, which is the very northeast area of the empire up here, that Darius goes to in hiding, and the guy, to try to get on the good side of Alexander, actually kills Darius and sends Alexander Darius's head. Alexander is actually not very happy about this one. He's kind of ticked off. He did not want to have things end that way. But once that was done, it was just done. He has conquered the empire. So he keeps moving, though. If you notice, there's tons of cities that he founds, all named after him, although the most famous one is the one over in Egypt. That's where you get like the lighthouse and the library of Alexandria that are very famous in ancient world history. But he's kind of addicted to this conquering thing, very addicted to this conquering thing. He just decides to keep going. So he starts invading India. He starts coming up against armies and peoples that just they've never met before, and they're very different culturally. He beats the first major army he comes across and wins a lot of skirmishes, but his soldiers pretty much get ticked off at him at this point. They love Alexander, but they get ticked off because he did promise them that once they conquer Persia, they'd be able to go home, keep their riches and their glory and go home, go see their wives that they haven't seen if they had one for like 10 years, their families. And plus, they were going up against elephants. Now, if I remember right, like they've seen elephants before. Elephants have been used before, but not like the way the Indians use them. And it really scared the crap out of them. And it's just one of those things like, well, we're seeing these type of animals. They're becoming more like we see more of them. What other animals are going to run into? What other crazy mythological beasts could be just beyond the next kingdom? You know what? Let's just stop now. So Alexander gives in, says, all right, we'll go home. And unfortunately for him, he dies on the way back. It's said that he just gets sick. Can't remember what he gets sick with, and dies. Yes, there's some conspiracy saying that he was assassinated. But again, most histories I've read just kind of concluding the idea like, yeah, he just got sick and died, which is very common throughout history, to just come down sick and die. Just anyways, even if you're a great and powerful person like Alexander, and he was very young, he was in his 30s. So, by the way, I'll actually talk about this more when we get to Rome, but his empire then separates into three major sections. I'll say this really quickly, and I'll actually end this video because we are going a bit long, and I'll talk about Hellenization in our very last video lesson. But basically, one of the generals gets Egypt, another general basically gets Greece, and then one general gets kind of most everything, gets all of basically Asia Minor, the Middle East, all the way out to India. And the three emperors are called the Ptolemaic Empire, the Seleucid Empire. So Ptolemaic is in Egypt, Seleucid is basically Middle East, and then the Antigonid Empire is basically Greece. And anyways, I'm introducing that because I will be bringing that back up later when we talk about Rome. So anyways, on this video at this point, that is the life and conquest of Alexander the Great. And we'll get to our very last lesson, which is on Hellenization, next time.